2 years, that's how long my wife, my brother, and my own children, my 17-year-old son and 15-year-old daughter, ran a family deception so elaborate it makes Ocean's 11 look like amateur hour. While I was building a multi-million-dollar business, they were building the most entertainingly terrible conspiracy in family history. The best part, my kids thought they were master criminals, but they had the operational security of a toddler hiding cookies. What I discovered wedged behind my son's desk didn't just blow up my marriage, it revealed every single detail of their 2-year operation. But let me paint you the picture of how this all started, because from the outside, we looked absolutely perfect. The perfect family facade falls apart. Picture this, 39 years old, married for 18 years, built a construction company from absolutely nothing into something worth multiple millions. My wife Sarah managed the home front with our 2 kids while I handled the business side. My son Jake just turned 17, my daughter Emma is 15. My younger brother Mike worked as my project manager, pulling decent money and learning the trade. Every Sunday we'd gather for family dinner with the whole extended family showing up. From any outside perspective, we had it made. The American dream wrapped up in suburban packaging with a bow on top. But apparently, while I was busy being the provider, my perfect family was auditioning for their own twisted reality show. About 18 months ago, the first red flag started waving, though at the time they looked more like gentle breezes than hurricane warnings. Sarah suddenly developed this intense interest in fitness. She joined not just any gym, but the expensive one across town with the personal trainers and fancy equipment. Her entire wardrobe got an upgrade too. Nothing dramatic, just higher quality clothes, better fitted, more attention to details I'd never seen her care about before. The woman who used to throw on whatever was clean started coordinating outfits like she was preparing for important meetings instead of running errands. Mike's behavior shifted around the same time. He started showing up at the house way more frequently, always with some work-related excuse. He dropped by after hours to discuss project timelines we'd already covered at the office that morning, turning our living room into some kind of Nancy Drew-level secret meeting headquarters. His visits became so regular that Sarah started making extra coffee in the evenings, knowing he'd probably swing by. The kids developed this weird habit of going silent whenever I walked into rooms. When I'd ask what they were talking about, I'd get variations of nothing delivered with all the believability of politicians making campaign promises. Their timing was so consistent it was almost impressive in its obviousness. Here's where my own personality worked against me. I'm not naturally suspicious. I built my business by trusting people until they gave me reasons not to. I figured Sarah was going through some kind of midlife confidence boost. Maybe she was feeling unappreciated, wanting to look good for herself. Fine, healthy even. Mike was probably dealing with issues in his own marriage. Lisa had been acting distant at family gatherings, barely participating in conversation. It made sense he'd want to spend time somewhere he felt appreciated. The kids were teenagers doing whatever mysterious things teenagers do. I had contracts to fulfill, employees depending on me, business decisions that couldn't wait. Looking back, I was basically starring in my own sitcom without realizing it. While I was focused on profit margins and project deadlines, my family was apparently running a covert operation that would make soap opera writers proud. The signs were there, glowing like neon billboards, but I was too busy reading financial reports to notice the drama unfolding in my own house. Successful men can be remarkably stupid about what's happening right under their noses. We're trained to solve problems at work, but somehow we miss the biggest problems happening at home. The whole thing would have been hilarious if it wasn't my life. My family thought they were running some sophisticated deception, but their operational security had more holes than Swiss cheese. They were like amateur spies who learned their techniques from watching bad movies. Mike would show up for these urgent work discussions right around the time I'd be leaving for evening site visits. Sarah would suggest I take my time, handle whatever needed handling, no rush getting home. The kids would suddenly have plans that kept them out of the house for hours. In retrospect, they were basically scheduling my own family around their conspiracy. They turned my work ethic against me, knowing I'd prioritize business obligations over questioning their increasingly transparent arrangements. The irony is that I was actually proud of how well my family seemed to be functioning. Sarah appeared happier, more confident. Mike was showing real initiative at work, taking on more responsibilities. The kids seemed more mature, more independent. I thought I was winning at this whole work-life balance thing. Turns out I was just funding the world's most dysfunctional family soap opera, while remaining blissfully unaware I was the only one not reading from the script. Everything changed 3 weeks ago with the most mundane request imaginable. Jake asked to borrow my AirPods because he'd lost his. Simple enough. I knew I'd left them on his desk earlier when I was helping him with some college application stuff. I went to his room to grab them, knocked over a stack of books on his desk while reaching around his laptop and found an old iPhone wedged behind them. Not his current phone, he carries that everywhere like it's surgically attached. This was an older model, probably a few generations back. The logical thing would have been to just grab my AirPods and leave, but something about finding a hidden phone in my son's room triggered every parental instinct I had. Was he dealing drugs, talking to girls I didn't approve of, having issues he couldn't discuss with me? The phone had battery, it wasn't locked. I figured I'd take a quick peek, make sure he wasn't in any trouble, then have a conversation about whatever I found. Honestly, the signs had been so obvious that even our neighbors probably would have noticed if they weren't too busy with their own suburban drama. What I was about to discover would prove that my 17-year-old son was apparently better at keeping secrets than most intelligence agencies, but terrible at hiding evidence. The iPhone that broke everything. That old iPhone was wedged behind Jake's books like he thought a few textbooks constituted advanced camouflage. I'm talking about a kid who can't remember to put his dishes in the dishwasher, but somehow he thought this hiding spot was sophisticated security. The whole setup screamed amateur hour, which should have been my first clue that whatever I was about to find would be equally lacking in professionalism. I stared at that phone for 30 seconds, knowing curiosity has killed more than cats. Sometimes it murders entire family structures, burns down marriages, and turns suburban homes into crime scenes. But my finger hit the power button anyway because apparently I needed to learn the hard way that some doors should stay closed. The screen lit up immediately. No passcode. My son's operational security was about as tight as a screen door on a submarine. What I found made me question whether my wife and brother had confused documenting their affair with creating a travel blog. 2 years of messages, photos, and videos that chronicled their relationship better than most people document their actual vacations. They had timestamps, locations, detailed commentary about their feelings. It was like they were building a scrapbook for the world's most twisted anniversary celebration. The sheer volume of evidence was staggering. The photos hit different than the messages. Hundreds of them, taken everywhere that mattered to me. They even turned my bed and office into affair backdrops, along with hotel rooms and my truck parked at job sites. They'd systematically claimed territory I thought belonged to my marriage, documenting their conquest of my entire life like some kind of perverted real estate portfolio. But the messages with Jake and Emma made everything else look like child's play. My kids hadn't just discovered their mother's affair and stayed quiet. They'd enlisted as active participants in what felt like the most dysfunctional family conspiracy ever conceived. The conversations showed months of coordination, planning, and active deception that required skills I didn't know they possessed. Their system was elaborate enough to impress intelligence operatives, if those operatives happened to be morally bankrupt. They had code words for everything. Messages like all clear and storm warnings filled their group chats, creating a whole linguistic framework for adultery that was both impressive and disgusting. Jake would get alerts whenever I left the office, giving them real-time updates on my location like some kind of family surveillance network. My son Jake had apparently become the family's IT department for adultery. He'd delete doorbell camera footage whenever Mike visited during suspicious hours. The kid who needed help setting up his PlayStation had somehow figured out how to systematically erase digital evidence from our home security system. He'd go into the app, find the relevant timeframes, and delete specific clips while leaving everything else intact. His technical skills improved dramatically when applied to covering up family betrayal. Emma created fake alibis with the creativity of a professional screenwriter. She'd text me about study groups that didn't exist, sleepovers at friends' houses that were complete fiction, and after-school activities she'd invented from scratch. Meanwhile, I was paying for her phone service and apparently funding her education in advanced deception techniques. She'd coordinate these fake activities with Sarah's schedule, making sure their stories aligned perfectly. The kids weren't just keeping quiet about what they'd discovered. They were active lookouts in their mother's affair, creating warning systems and alibis that kept the whole operation running smoothly. They'd positioned themselves strategically around the house when Mike visited, ready to alert everyone if my plans changed. Emma would suddenly need help with homework if I came home unexpectedly. Jake would create emergencies that required my immediate attention elsewhere. Reading through months of their coordination was like watching my own children transform into people I didn't recognize. They discussed my schedule like I was some kind of obstacle to be managed rather than their father. They analyzed my behavior patterns, predicted my reactions, and planned around my movements with cold efficiency. The casual way they talked about deceiving me was more disturbing than the affair itself. Jake had twisted technology I'd given him for safety into a surveillance system for tracking my movements. He'd alert everyone in the family conspiracy when I was heading home, when I'd be working late, when I had weekend site visits planned. My son had become mission control for his mother's affair, coordinating logistics with precision that would make military commanders proud. The emotional impact hit me in waves as I scrolled through evidence of my own children choosing sides against me. They'd made a conscious decision to protect their mother's affair rather than tell me the truth. Every family dinner, every casual conversation, Every moment of normal interaction had been a performance designed to keep me ignorant. Something strange happened as I absorbed the full scope of their deception. I felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, no shock, just a weird calm that settled over me like fog. My emotions shut down completely, leaving behind something cold and analytical. I started thinking like a business owner who discovered employees stealing from the company. I took photos of everything on that phone. Screenshots of messages, pictures of their photos, documentation of their entire coordination system. I turned into a forensic investigator in my own family drama, building a case with the same methodical approach I used for major construction projects. Shock had apparently turned me into someone who collected evidence instead of processing emotions. That hidden iPhone had revealed 2 years of plotted betrayal so thorough it made reality TV look realistic. What they didn't know was that their amateur hour security had just handed me everything I needed to change the game completely. Now I had to go back downstairs and pretend I was still the same oblivious husband and father they thought they were manipulating. The Oscar-worthy performance begins. Walking back into my house felt like stepping onto a movie set where everyone else had the script except me. The surreal part wasn't just knowing about the affair, it was realizing I'd been the only person in my own family who wasn't in on the joke. Every conversation, every family dinner, every casual interaction had been a carefully orchestrated performance designed to keep me playing the role of the clueless husband. That first dinner after my discovery was pure theater. Sarah sat across from me making small talk about her day at the gym, probably the same gym where she'd been discussing her future with my brother. Mike dropped by around 7, just like always, carrying blueprints and acting like he needed my input on tomorrow's concrete pour. The three of them maintained perfect composure while I sat there knowing everything. It was like watching amateur actors who'd somehow convinced themselves they were professionals. The only difference was that I was now the one giving the performance of a lifetime. Sarah's sudden interest in physical intimacy became fascinating from a psychological perspective. She'd initiated more romantic encounters in the past week than she had in the previous 6 months combined. I found myself wondering if guilt makes people more affectionate, or if she was running some kind of comparison study between her husband and her brother-in-law. Either way, her timing was impressively terrible. The dinner conversations became these weird exercises in performance art. Mike would ask about business projections while sleeping with my wife. Sarah would compliment my work ethic while coordinating schedules around their affair. The kids would participate in normal family discussions while knowing they were all lying to my face. Everyone played their part so convincingly that I started appreciating the sheer amount of effort required to maintain such elaborate deception. My emotional shutdown worked perfectly for what I needed to accomplish. While they were focused on maintaining their performances, I was planning their destruction with the same methodical approach I used for major construction projects. Revenge plotting apparently requires the exact same skill set as running a business: strategic thinking, timeline management, resource allocation, and attention to detail. The only difference was that instead of building something, I was systematically dismantling everything they thought they'd built. The irony was beautiful. My family thought they were master manipulators pulling strings I couldn't see, while I was actually the one orchestrating moves they'd never anticipate. They were playing checkers while I was setting up a chess game they didn't even know had started. Sarah would praise my newfound interest in financial planning, not realizing I was liquidating joint assets. Mike would thank me for giving him more responsibilities at work, not understanding I was documenting his incompetence for legal purposes. Acting normal while planning their complete destruction required method acting skills I didn't know I possessed. I had to maintain the facade of the devoted husband and brother while preparing to burn down everything we'd built together. The challenge wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. I needed to appear completely normal while secretly consulting divorce attorneys, moving money, and gathering evidence. Every casual conversation became a potential minefield where one wrong word could expose my plans. Sarah started commenting on my improved mood and increased focus. She attributed my better attitude to finally taking her advice about work-life balance. What she didn't realize was that my improved mood came from knowing her affair was about to become the most expensive mistake she'd ever made. She was essentially complimenting me for planning her downfall, while thinking she was encouraging healthy life changes. The business side required careful maneuvering. I started giving Mike additional projects that highlighted his drinking problems and poor decision-making. He thought I was showing confidence in his abilities, not realizing I was building a documentation trail for his termination. Every mistake he made got carefully recorded. Every time he showed up hungover or made poor judgment calls, I made notes. He was enthusiastically participating in his own professional destruction. I consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys before choosing the one who laughed the loudest when I showed him my evidence. That reaction told me everything I needed to know about how this would play out in court. Having 2 years of documented adultery, including photos taken in our marital bed, was apparently the equivalent of holding a royal flush in a poker game where everyone else was bluffing. Setting up the new LLC in another state, while maintaining normal business operations required juggling that would impress circus performers. I was essentially planning my escape while appearing to invest more heavily in our current life. Sarah thought my increased business travel meant I was expanding operations. Mike thought my focus on new partnerships showed confidence in our company's future. Neither of them realized I was building my exit strategy one business meeting at a time. The kids continued their surveillance activities, not knowing I was now watching them watch me. Jake would get alerts about my location and dutifully report my movements to the family conspiracy. Emma would create fake alibis and coordinate cover stories. They thought they were protecting their mother's secret while actually providing me with additional evidence of their involvement. My newfound interest in family finances impressed Sarah so much that she started bragging to her friends about my responsible approach to money management. She had no idea that my responsible approach involved systematically removing her access to assets she thought were secure. I was closing credit accounts, moving investments, and liquidating property while she praised my financial maturity. The beauty of the whole operation was how they all supported moves that would ultimately destroy them. Financial chess moves and business warfare. Moving money around while maintaining perfect family harmony required skills they don't teach in business school. Sarah thought my sudden concern about our financial future was adorable. She'd find me at the kitchen table going through bank statements and investment portfolios, rubbing my shoulders while telling me how responsible I was being. What she didn't realize was that her loving husband was playing financial chess while she was still figuring out checkers. Every worried conversation about market volatility was actually me calculating exactly how much money I could move before she noticed. Closing joint accounts became an art form disguised as fiscal responsibility. I told Sarah I was consolidating our finances to better track spending and prepare for the kids' college expenses. She thought this was brilliant financial planning. I moved my direct deposits to a new individual account, explaining that separating business income from personal expenses would help with tax planning. She praised my organizational skills while I was basically executing the greatest heist of my own money in suburban history. Every dollar I moved was another step toward making sure she couldn't access assets she thought were secure. The boat had to go first. I'd bought that thing 3 years ago thinking we'd spend weekends on the lake as a family. Instead, it mostly sat in the driveway collecting pollen and reminding me that family time was apparently less important than secret affairs. I told Sarah we needed to be more practical with our money, especially with college tuition looming. She agreed immediately, saying she'd always thought the boat was unnecessary anyway. The irony was perfect. She was helping me liquidate assets that would fund my escape while thinking she was contributing to sound financial planning. That $35,000 from the boat sale went straight into an account she didn't know existed. My motorcycle followed the same pattern. I'd owned that Harley for 8 years, but suddenly I was talking about safety concerns and practical transportation. Sarah loved this new responsible version of her husband. She even helped me research which dealership would give us the best trade-in value. The woman was basically my personal assistant for dismantling our shared assets while thinking she was supporting mature decision-making. Another $18,000 disappeared into my private financial fortress. Mike's expanded responsibilities at work became my favorite comedy show. I promoted him to operations director with a small raise and made a big production about trusting him with larger projects. He thought I was finally recognizing his potential. What I was actually doing was giving him enough rope to hang himself professionally while creating legal liability that would make terminating him easier than firing someone who steals office supplies. Every new responsibility came with documentation requirements that highlighted his drinking problems and poor judgment. The beauty of Mike's situation was how his alcoholism started working in my favor. I began scheduling important client meetings for Monday mornings when his weekend drinking left him looking like he'd been hit by a truck. I'd assign him critical deadlines right after his drinking binges, then document every missed deadline and sloppy mistake. His breath would reek of alcohol at 9 a.m. client meetings, and I'd make detailed notes about every unprofessional moment. Mike thought I was giving him opportunities to shine, but I was actually creating a paper trail that would make his termination legally bulletproof. Setting up the new LLC felt like planning a prison break while the guards helped you dig the tunnel. I told Sarah and Mike that I was diversifying our business interests to protect against economic downturns. They both thought this showed incredible foresight. Meanwhile, I was establishing a completely separate business structure in another state that would let me continue working without them. The paperwork for the new company got filed while Mike was praising my strategic thinking and Sarah was proud of my business expansion. My foreman Danny became the most important promotion I ever made. This guy had worked for me for 12 years, showing up early, staying late, and never stealing from me or sleeping with my wife. Revolutionary concept, apparently. I started transitioning more operational control to him while framing it as preparing for our business expansion. Mike saw Danny's promotion as natural progression. What Mike didn't see was that Danny was essentially replacing him before Mike knew he was being replaced. The investment portfolio liquidation required Academy Award-level acting. I convinced Sarah that the market was heading for a major correction, and we needed to move our money to safer instruments. She bought into this theory completely, even doing her own research that supported my fake concerns about economic instability. She was so proud of our financial wisdom, as we liquidated investments worth over $200,000. That money moved into accounts she couldn't access, protected by legal structures she didn't know existed. Our house represented the biggest chess move of all. I started conversations about upgrading to a larger property, talking about how our growing business could support a better lifestyle. Sarah got excited about house hunting, spending weekends looking at properties that cost twice what our current place was worth. She thought we were planning our future together, when I was actually calculating exactly how much equity I could extract before filing for divorce. Danny's loyalty made Mike's betrayal even more obvious. While Mike was using company time to plan affairs and showing up hungover to important meetings, Danny was solving problems and covering for Mike's mistakes without being asked. The contrast became so stark that even clients started commenting on Danny's professionalism compared to Mike's increasingly obvious drinking problems. But the financial maneuvering was just the beginning. The real challenge wasn't dealing with my cheating wife or alcoholic brother. The hardest part was figuring out what to do about two teenagers who'd chosen to become active participants in destroying their own father. The kids choose their side. Jake and Emma had transformed from typical teenagers into master conspirators, which would have been impressive if it wasn't so completely screwed up. These are kids who can't remember to put their dishes in the dishwasher without being reminded 17 times, but somehow they developed operational security skills that would make intelligence agencies jealous. Jake started asking weird questions about my travel schedule and business plans. At first, I thought he was finally showing interest in the family business. Turns out his sudden curiosity about my whereabouts was him gathering intelligence for their family conspiracy. He'd probe about upcoming site visits, weekend work plans, and evening meetings with persistence that would make investigative reporters proud. The irony was that his newfound interest in my professional life was actually surveillance disguised as father-son bonding. Emma's slip-up came through a text message she thought she'd deleted. She'd sent Sarah a message saying, "Dad's acting different lately, do you think he knows something?" and then immediately tried to delete it. Her spy skills were about as sophisticated as a sitcom character who always gets caught at the worst possible moment. The girl who couldn't keep track of her own homework somehow thought she could manage digital evidence without leaving traces. The realization that they saw me as clueless dad was the most insulting part of this whole situation. They'd spent months analyzing my behavior patterns, predicting my reactions, and planning around my schedule while thinking I was too stupid to notice anything unusual. They had me categorized as the bumbling father figure who was too busy with work to pay attention to his own family. That perception was about to get the reality check of their lifetimes. Their elaborate warning system turned my house into a surveillance operation that would make the NSA proud. They had assigned positions during Mike's visits, backup plans for unexpected situations, and communication protocols that rivaled military operations. Jake would position himself where he could see the driveway and alert everyone when I was coming home. Emma would create distractions if I showed up earlier than expected. They'd transformed family time into tactical exercises designed around keeping me ignorant of what was happening in my own house. The kids thought they were protecting their mother from a terrible situation, but they were actually digging their own financial graves with every lie they told. Each fake alibi, each deleted video, each coordinated deception was another shovel full of dirt in the hole they were creating for themselves. They had no concept that adult games come with adult consequences, and those consequences weren't going to be anything they'd want to face. Liquidating their college funds felt like the most natural consequence in the world. These kids had spent over a year actively working against me, coordinating with people who were planning to destroy our family. They'd made their choice about which side they were on, and that choice came with financial implications they'd never considered. Jake's fund had grown to about $43,000. Emma's was sitting at $38,000. That money was going to fund my new life instead of their education, which seemed like poetic justice considering they'd learned their deception skills somewhere other than school. Cutting off their credit cards was equally satisfying. Emma had been using her card for everything from gas to clothes to meals with friends, never thinking about where that money came from. Jake used his for car maintenance, video games, and whatever teenage boys spend money on when they think their father is a walking ATM. Both cards got canceled the same day I discovered their involvement in the family conspiracy. They were about to learn that financial support comes with expectations of basic loyalty and honesty. Jake's job deleting doorbell camera footage showed dedication that was both impressive and infuriating. He'd go into the app every few days and selectively remove clips that showed Mike's visits during suspicious hours. The kid had apparently taught himself digital forensics in service of his mother's affair. He'd leave footage from normal family activities while erasing evidence of the conspiracy, creating a sanitized version of our family life that protected everyone except me. Emma's alibi creation required creativity that would have served her well in a writing career. She'd invent study groups that didn't exist, sleepovers with friends who were never contacted, and after-school activities that had no connection to her actual schedule. She'd coordinate these fictional activities with Sarah's real schedule, making sure their stories supported each other perfectly. The girl had basically become a professional fiction writer in service of family betrayal. Their loyalty to Sarah over me was the most painful part of discovering their involvement. They'd made a conscious choice to protect her affair rather than consider what this would do to me or our family. Every family dinner where they sat across from me knowing what they knew was another betrayal. Every casual conversation was another lie. They decided I was the enemy in a war I didn't even know was being fought. The consequences were going to teach them lessons that I apparently couldn't. Adult choices require adult accountability, and they were about to discover that actions have reactions that multiply faster than their text message warnings. But dealing with my kids was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. There was still one more person who deserved to know the truth about what had been happening right under all our noses. The brother's wife gets her own package. Lisa deserved better than discovering her husband's betrayal through a manila envelope, but sometimes the messenger matters less than the message. While everyone else in our family had been running around playing games that would make reality TV producers jealous, Lisa had been going to work, taking care of their house, and apparently believing she was married to someone with basic human decency. The woman had been sharing a bed with a man whose moral compass was more broken than a GPS in a tunnel. Preparing her evidence package became my favorite documentation project. I printed every message, every photo, every piece of coordination between Mike and Sarah that showed the scope of their 2-year relationship. Lisa was getting the complete documentary of her husband's affair, organized chronologically with timestamps and locations. The woman who had to find out through third-party evidence was going to get documentation so thorough that investigators would be impressed. I included photos they'd taken in our bed, messages where they discussed leaving their spouses, and detailed planning about their future together that read like the world's worst romance novel. The irony was beautiful in the most twisted way possible. Lisa had always been genuinely good to our family. She'd bring homemade food to our Sunday dinners, remember everyone's birthdays, and try to include everyone in conversations even when the rest of us were being antisocial. She was married to someone who apparently specialized in destroying families for entertainment, but she kept showing up to family events with a smile and covered dishes. The woman had been trying to build relationships with people who were actively lying to her face every week. Timing her package delivery required the same precision I used for coordinating major construction projects. I needed her to receive everything simultaneously with my other moves, creating a chain reaction that would make demolition experts proud. Lisa was scheduled to get her surprise package on the same morning Sarah would find divorce papers and Mike would discover his unemployment status. Simultaneous destruction creates the most efficient chaos, like watching dominoes fall in perfect sequence, except each domino represents someone's entire life exploding. Lisa was about to receive the worst surprise package since unwanted medical test results. The woman who probably expected nothing more exciting than bills and promotional flyers was going to open her mailbox and find comprehensive documentation of her husband's 2-year affair. I could picture her initial confusion, then growing horror as she realized what she was looking at. The evidence would hit her like a freight train carrying cargo made entirely of devastating truth and photographic proof. Mike thought he was getting away with everything while his own wife was about to become his judge, jury, and executioner, all rolled into one incredibly betrayed woman. The man had spent 2 years sneaking around, lying to everyone, and thinking he was some kind of master manipulator. He had no idea that his biggest vulnerability wasn't his drinking problem or his poor work performance. His biggest weakness was that he betrayed someone who actually loved him and trusted him completely. Lisa's reaction was going to make my revenge look gentle by comparison. The comprehensive evidence I'd compiled for Lisa showed that thoroughness in documentation apparently runs in our family, just not in the ways anyone expected. While Mike and Sarah had been documenting their relationship like amateur filmmakers creating the world's most inappropriate documentary, I'd been documenting their documentation with the precision of someone building a legal case. Lisa was getting copies of photos, screenshots of messages, and a timeline that would help her understand exactly how long her marriage had been a complete lie. Mike's marriage was about to become collateral damage in a war he'd started but couldn't finish. The man had apparently thought he could compartmentalize his affair, keeping his home life separate from his destruction of mine. He'd underestimated how interconnected betrayal becomes when you're stupid enough to have an affair with your brother's wife while working for that same brother. Lisa's package would connect all the dots he'd thought he could keep separate, showing her that their entire relationship had been built on lies for the past 2 years. Lisa's reaction would also create problems Mike hadn't anticipated. The woman who'd been supporting his career, managing their household, and maintaining their social relationships was about to become his biggest adversary. She knew where all his professional contacts were, had access to their financial records, and could probably provide character references that would destroy any future employment opportunities. Mike was about to learn that betraying someone who actually knew how to organize and plan was significantly more dangerous than betraying someone like me who'd been too busy to pay attention. The poetic justice was that Mike had always underestimated Lisa the same way he'd underestimated me. He thought she was just the quiet, supportive wife who wouldn't cause problems or ask difficult questions. He'd treated her like background furniture in his own life while planning his future with someone else's wife. Lisa was about to show him that quiet people aren't necessarily passive people, and supportive wives can become incredibly unsupportive when they discover comprehensive evidence of betrayal. One hidden phone was about to destroy more relationships than an entire season of reality television. Mike and Sarah's affair had created a web of deception that involved our entire extended family, but they'd apparently never considered what would happen when that web got exposed to everyone simultaneously. Lisa's package was the final piece in a puzzle that would show everyone exactly how many lies had been necessary to maintain their perfect little arrangement. But sending Lisa her evidence package was just one component of a much larger operation that required the same systematic approach I'd used to build my business from nothing. The Great Escape Plan. Planning my escape required the same methodical approach I used for major construction projects, except instead of building something, I was systematically dismantling my entire life. My upcoming business trip to Denver was actually a one-way ticket to freedom, disguised as routine corporate expansion. The beauty was that everyone thought I was being responsible about growing our operations. Sarah was proud of my entrepreneurial spirit. Mike thought I was giving him opportunities to prove himself during my absence. The kids assumed I'd return in a few days with the usual business trip souvenirs. None of them realized they were enthusiastically supporting my permanent disappearance. Shipping my belongings ahead became the most satisfying packing experience of my life. I'd box up essential items and mail them to my new apartment, then replace them with similar things so nobody would notice the gradual disappearance of my stuff. I shipped important documents, favorite books, tools I couldn't replace, and clothes that actually fit properly. What stayed behind was everything connected to the life I was abandoning. Wedding photos, family vacation souvenirs, gifts from people who'd been lying to me for 2 years. The physical act of separating my real belongings from the props in this family theater felt incredibly therapeutic. My new apartment setup turned me into a refugee from suburban betrayal. I'd rented and furnished a 2-bedroom place in a city where nobody knew my name or my story. The apartment came with a gym membership, cable package, and everything needed to start over completely. New bank accounts, utility services, even a different grocery store chain. I was essentially joining my own witness protection program, protecting myself from people who shared my DNA. The job lined up in my new city made this transition feel like professional rebirth. A large commercial development needed someone with my exact experience managing complex projects and difficult personnel. The timing was perfect, the pay was excellent, and nobody there knew anything about my personal drama. I'd be building something new while my old life imploded 2,000 miles away. While my family thought I was expanding our business, I was actually starting over in an industry where my reputation preceded my personal disasters. My final family interactions required acting skills that would make method actors jealous. Saying goodbye to people you're about to destroy demands emotional control I didn't know I possessed. I hugged my kids like a normal father heading out on routine business travel. I kissed Sarah goodbye at the front door while she reminded me to call when I landed safely. I shook Mike's hand during our final weekly meeting, discussing project timelines he'd never complete. Every gesture had to appear completely normal while being absolutely final. Mike's last professional meeting with me became performance art disguised as business planning. He had no idea he was about to become unemployed in spectacular fashion. We discussed his expanded responsibilities, reviewed upcoming project deadlines, and talked about efficiency improvements he could implement during my absence. The man was enthusiastically planning his own work schedule for a job he was about to lose. He thanked me for trusting him with additional responsibilities while I documented his final acts of professional incompetence. Preparing the folder that would destroy my family felt like creating the worst surprise breakfast reading material in human history. Divorce papers, financial statements, printed screenshots of their affair, and a USB drive containing 2 years of evidence, all organized in a manila folder that would end their perfect arrangement. I included a sticky note that simply read, "I know everything. Don't contact me. Communicate through lawyers only." The whole package was designed to deliver maximum shock with minimum explanation. My new phone represented the most satisfying technology upgrade ever purchased. I factory reset my old phone and left it in the kitchen drawer next to the evidence folder, like erasing my family connection with a software update. My new number was already active, known only to my lawyer, my new employer, and essential business contacts. The symbolic act of cutting digital ties felt as liberating as changing locks on a house. The timing had to be perfect for maximum dramatic impact. I needed to be 30,000 feet in the air when they discovered the evidence, creating the ideal altitude for watching my old life implode from a safe distance. Sarah would wake up around 7 a.m. for her usual coffee and find divorce papers instead of a good morning text from her traveling husband. Mike would arrive for work to find termination letters and personal liability documentation. The kids would discover their credit cards had been canceled and their college funds had vanished. My lawyer had everything prepared for remote handling of the legal aftermath. The evidence I'd provided made divorce proceedings a formality rather than a battle. Mike's termination was legally bulletproof, complete with documentation of his drinking problems and professional failures. The house sale could proceed without my physical presence. The business restructuring meant I could disappear without destroying the company or employees who hadn't betrayed me. Danny would take over operations with 60% ownership in a legitimate sale that closed after my departure. I'd maintain 40% as a silent partner, ensuring continued income without daily involvement. Mike would be removed from company leadership and held personally liable for any major failures. By the time my plane reached cruising altitude, my carefully orchestrated plan would be detonating like a precision demolition across multiple lives simultaneously. The phone in my carry-on bag was about to become very, very busy. The bomb goes off. The sound of 47 missed calls was apparently what a family conspiracy sounds like when it crashes into reality. My phone started lighting up around 10 a.m., which meant they'd all had enough time to process their morning surprises and move into full panic mode. The call log looked like a phone book had exploded. Sarah, Mike, Jake, Emma, even my parents who'd somehow gotten dragged into this mess already. Each missed call represented another moment of their perfect little world crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Sarah's discovery of the evidence folder turned her usual 7 a.m. coffee routine into the worst wake-up call in suburban history. Picture this. Woman walks into her kitchen expecting to start another day of coordinating secret affairs, instead finds divorce papers and 2 years of photographic evidence spread across the counter like the world's most devastating breakfast menu. My lawyer told me later that she called him screaming, crying, demanding to know where I was. Apparently, finding out your husband documented every detail of your adultery while you thought he was clueless makes for terrible breakfast conversation. Mike's arrival at our house for damage control created the kind of neighborhood drama that makes HOA meetings look peaceful. Turns out adultery doesn't actually prepare people for crisis management, which became obvious when their discussion escalated into screaming loud enough to wake people 3 houses away. The neighbors called police after listening to Mike and Sarah blame each other for their situation at volumes that would make concert speakers jealous. Nothing says sophisticated conspiracy like having law enforcement show up to referee your affair aftermath in front of the entire cul-de-sac. Jake's attempt to access his college fund that afternoon provided the kind of educational experience they don't teach in high school economics classes. The kid tried to put down a deposit for his dorm room and discovered that betraying your father comes with significantly more financial consequences than finding out Santa isn't real. His account showed a balance that would make broke college students look wealthy by comparison. The surprise apparently hit harder than any lesson about consequences his mother had ever attempted to teach him. Emma's declined lunch card became her introduction to how quickly privilege disappears when the person paying the bills decides you've chosen the wrong side in a family war. The girl who'd never worried about money suddenly found herself unable to buy cafeteria food because her account had been terminated faster than a dropped phone call. Her friends probably got their first real-world lesson in how financial support isn't guaranteed when you spend months helping your mother deceive your father. Lisa's Facebook revenge turned social media into public humiliation performance art for the digital age. The woman didn't just leave Mike, she went full scorched earth by posting every piece of evidence I'd sent her, complete with tags for everyone involved. The whole town knew within hours because Lisa understood that small communities love big scandals almost as much as they love watching people get exactly what they deserve. Her posts included photos, message screenshots, and commentary that made professional social media managers weep with admiration for her thoroughness. Sarah's damage control attempts resembled using a band-aid on a severed artery of reputation. She posted something about going through a difficult time and asking for privacy, which went over about as well as expected when everyone had already seen comprehensive evidence of her 2-year affair with her brother-in-law. The woman was trying to manage her image after the entire community had photographic proof of why her image deserved to be destroyed. Her friends started distancing themselves faster than people evacuating a building fire. The children scrambling for alternatives provided educational experiences in personal responsibility that their previous lifestyle had never required. Jake suddenly needed student loans because daddy's money disappeared along with daddy's tolerance for family betrayal. Emma got her first part-time job because allowance money doesn't come from fathers who discover their children helped destroy their marriages. Both kids learned that community college looks significantly more appealing when your college fund evaporates due to poor decision-making about family loyalty. My lawyer's reaction to Sarah's abandonment and alimony claims was professional amusement mixed with legal satisfaction. The man literally laughed during our phone conversation because adultery evidence makes divorce negotiations shorter than the average sitcom episode. Sarah's claims that I'd abandoned the family fell apart when presented with documentation showing she'd been planning to leave me for my brother while using my money to fund their relationship. The extended family reactions created social destruction that spread through our community like wildfire in drought conditions. My parents changed their will after reviewing evidence that their younger son had been systematically destroying their older son's family for personal entertainment. Sarah's friends stopped returning calls after seeing photographic proof of why their friendship might reflect poorly on their own judgment. The ripple effects multiplied faster than gossip at church socials, creating consequences that reached far beyond the immediate family destruction. But watching everyone's world implode from 2,000 miles away was just the beginning. Some people apparently needed additional lessons in how spectacularly bad decisions can destroy professional lives along with personal ones. Career destruction and social fallout. Mike showing up to work the morning after his life exploded required confidence that was either admirable or completely delusional. The man walked into our construction office like he still had executive responsibilities, apparently thinking that sleeping with his brother's wife was just another workplace challenge he could manage through. He strutted in carrying his usual coffee and clipboard, ready to discuss project timelines with people who'd already received his termination letter via certified mail. The disconnect between his expectations and reality was massive enough to be seen from space. Danny, my foreman who is now majority owner, handled Mike's escort with the professionalism of someone removing a trespasser rather than firing a former executive. Security walked Mike out faster than a bad date gets blocked after sending inappropriate photos. One minute he was asking about the concrete delivery schedule. The next minute he was being told to clean out his desk, while someone watched to make sure he didn't steal office supplies. The transformation from project manager to escorted visitor happened so quickly that Mike barely had time to process what was occurring before he found himself standing in the parking lot holding a cardboard box. His wrongful termination claim got dismissed faster than his marriage once our company lawyer presented evidence of workplace misconduct. Mike apparently thought wrongful was an absolute term, not realizing it becomes relative when you're caught using company property for adultery activities. The work truck he'd been driving showed GPS records of visits to hotels during business hours. His company phone contained messages coordinating affair logistics instead of construction schedules. The man had basically created his own evidence file for professional misconduct while thinking he was being clever about his personal life. The bragging Mike had done about his promotion and the loans he'd secured based on his anticipated executive salary created a financial disaster that would make bankruptcy attorneys rich. He'd been counting chickens before they hatched, then discovered the chickens could apparently repossess your house when the expected income disappears overnight. The boat loan, motorcycle payment, and credit cards he'd obtained based on projected earnings were still due even though his employment had been terminated for cause. Mike learned that banks don't care about your personal drama when monthly payments come due. Unemployment hits differently when it arrives with public humiliation and social media documentation. Mike wasn't just losing his job, he was becoming unemployed in the most spectacular fashion possible while the entire community watched his professional reputation burn in real time. Lisa's Facebook posts had tagged him in enough evidence to make future employers run background checks that would reveal his creative use of company resources. The man went from executive status to unemployable faster than gossip spreads through small construction crews. Jake scrambling for college alternatives taught him that community college suddenly looks appealing when daddy's money disappears along with daddy's tolerance for family betrayal. The kid who'd been planning on his first choice university discovered that student loans require credit histories and cosigners who aren't currently disowning you. His guidance counselor had to completely restructure his post-graduation plans because his college fund had evaporated faster than his father's patience for elaborate family conspiracies. Jake learned that financing education becomes significantly more challenging when your funding source decides you've been working for the wrong team. Emma's introduction to the workforce came through her first part-time job at a local retail store, where she discovered that work is a shocking concept when you've been living on betrayal and allowance money. The girl who'd never worried about earning spending money suddenly found herself folding clothes and dealing with difficult customers for minimum wage. Her manager probably had no idea that the new teenage employee was learning basic work ethics because her previous source of income had been terminated due to her participation in family deception. Emma discovered that paychecks are significantly smaller than allowances, especially when you're starting from zero work experience. Mike's attempts to establish his own competing construction company failed within 3 months because reputation damage in small industries lasts longer than most grudges. No suppliers would extend credit to someone whose professional misconduct had been documented and distributed throughout the local business community. Potential clients had heard enough stories about his workplace behavior to make them question his judgment on construction projects. His business collapsed faster than his marriage because small-town industries have long memories for people who misuse trust and resources. Sarah's financial situation deteriorated predictably once her settlement money started running out. The $200,000 from the house sale was disappearing faster than her social connections because maintaining her previous lifestyle required income she no longer had access to. Her lack of job skills became obvious when the only employment she could find was retail work that paid less per hour than her previous daily spending habits. The woman who'd been planning a future with my brother discovered that adultery doesn't come with career training or financial planning assistance. The consequences continued spreading through our extended family and social networks like ripples from stones thrown in still water. My parents removed Mike from their will after reviewing the evidence file. Sarah's family stopped defending her on social media after receiving cease and desist letters that included photographic proof of why their defense efforts were misguided. The whole situation became a case study in how consequences multiply and spread far beyond the original participants when actions involve systematic deception of multiple people. But watching everyone's professional and social destruction from 2,000 miles away was just the beginning of understanding how thoroughly evidence can reshape legal proceedings. Legal victory and family destruction. My lawyer's reaction to seeing 2 years of adultery evidence was the sound of legal victory mixed with professional amusement. The man literally laughed during our phone consultation, which told me everything I needed to know about how this would play out in court. He said he'd seen plenty of cheating spouse cases, but nothing quite as thoroughly documented as what I'd handed him. Sarah's affair had been photographed, time-stamped, and organized better than most people's tax records. The evidence was so comprehensive that my lawyer probably felt like he was being handed the easiest case of his career. Adultery evidence makes divorce negotiations shorter than whatever was left of my marriage's credibility. The settlement talks lasted exactly 1 meeting because Sarah's attorney took 1 look at the documentation and basically threw in the towel. 2 years of photos taken in our marital bed, messages planning their future together, and coordination with our children created what lawyers call an open and shut case. Sarah went from demanding half of everything to accepting whatever the state minimum required, which was significantly less than her previous expectations. Sarah's abandonment claims got dismissed so quickly they probably broke some kind of legal speed record. Her attorney tried arguing that I'd abandoned the family by leaving without notice, which prompted my lawyer to present evidence showing she'd been planning to leave me for my brother while using my money to fund their relationship. You can't abandon people who are actively conspiring against you. The judge reviewed the evidence and shut down her abandonment argument faster than I'd shut down Mike's employment. The settlement gave Sarah $200,000 from the house sale and minimal alimony for 2 years, as mandated by state law. Her attorney had initially pushed for much more, but adultery evidence has a way of adjusting expectations downward rapidly. The woman who'd spent years managing household expenses and coordinating affairs discovered that neither qualification translated into employable skills in the real world. Her settlement money started disappearing faster than her social connections because she'd never learned to live within an income she had to earn herself. My parents' reaction after reviewing the evidence file changed family loyalty faster than a weather report changes from sunny to stormy. They'd always preferred Mike, the charming younger son who could talk his way out of any situation. But apparently charm doesn't work on photographic evidence and timestamp messages showing systematic betrayal of family relationships. My father called me personally to apologize for not believing my concerns about Mike's behavior over the years. My mother sent a handwritten letter saying she was proud of how I'd handled the situation. The will changes happened so quickly that betrayal apparently comes with inheritance consequences Mike had never calculated into his future financial planning. My father removed Mike from any significant inheritance and redistributed those assets to me and my sister, who did nothing to do with this mess. Mike went from expecting a substantial inheritance to receiving what my father called enough money for a decent funeral. The old man had always been practical about consequences, and apparently adultery with your brother's wife fell into the category of actions that forfeit future family financial benefits. Sarah's family tried mounting a social media defense campaign, until cease and desist letters proved more effective than arguing with people whose judgment was questionable enough to produce someone like Sarah. Her parents and siblings started posting about how I'd abandoned a loving wife and destroyed an innocent family. My lawyer sent them copies of the evidence along with formal legal warnings about defamation and harassment. The social media attacks stopped completely within 48 hours of those letters being delivered. The extended family silence after seeing the evidence was immediate and complete. Sarah's aunts, cousins, and family friends who'd initially supported her during the divorce proceedings went completely quiet once they saw the comprehensive documentation of her 2-year affair. Nobody wants to defend adultery when the evidence includes photos taken in the wronged husband's bed and messages calling him an obstacle to be removed. The family gatherings they'd been organizing to support Sarah during her difficult time suddenly got canceled indefinitely. Complete social destruction spread through our community like wildfire in drought conditions, with reputation damage that would be discussed at every social gathering for years. Small towns love big scandals, especially when they involve families that everyone thought they knew. Sarah went from respected community member to local cautionary tale faster than gossip spreads through church committees. Mike's reputation in the construction industry became so toxic that suppliers wouldn't work with him even if he could have afforded their services. The legal victory had been so complete that even my lawyer seemed impressed by how thoroughly the evidence had dismantled every claim Sarah's attorney attempted to make. Justice served with comprehensive documentation and professional legal representation creates outcomes that feel more satisfying than any revenge fantasy could have provided. But the real satisfaction wasn't just winning in court, it was discovering what life looks like when you remove all the people who were actively working against your happiness. New life, new rules, no regrets. 2,000 miles of distance turned out to be the perfect prescription for mental health recovery that no doctor had ever recommended. My stress levels dropped so dramatically that I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. My blood pressure went down enough that my doctor asked what changes I'd made to my lifestyle. I told him I'd gotten divorced and fired my brother, and he said that was probably the best medical intervention he'd heard of all year. Removing toxic people from your life is like taking off weights you didn't realize you were carrying. My business growth after focusing on work instead of family betrayal turned out to be surprisingly profitable. Without Mike's drinking problems creating client relations disasters, without constant drama interrupting my focus, and without supporting people who were actively working against me, my company exceeded every projection I'd made. I landed 3 major commercial contracts in my first 6 months in the new city, projects that were bigger than anything I'd handled back home. Apparently, when you're not spending mental energy managing family conspiracies, you have significantly more brain power available for actual business decisions. The physical transformation that came with channeling anger into productive exercise hit different when you're literally lifting the weight of betrayal off your shoulders. I dropped 30 pounds and added muscle mass that made me look better at 40 than I had at 30. The gym became my sanctuary where nobody lied to me about anything, where results were honest and effort produced visible outcomes. Women started noticing me in ways that reminded me what actual attraction looks like when it's not mixed with deception and manipulation. My dating prospects improved dramatically once I became a single, successful man in his late 30s with no baggage and children who lived in another state. Turns out women find it attractive when men have their lives together, demonstrate backbone in difficult situations, and aren't supporting extended families of liars. The contrast between dating as a free man versus being married to someone who was planning my replacement was like comparing fine dining to eating garbage. I had options, standards, and the luxury of choosing partners who actually wanted to be with me. Mike's continued failures provided ongoing entertainment about how reputation damage in small industries lasts longer than most grudges. His attempts to establish competing businesses kept failing because nobody would work with someone whose professional misconduct had been documented and distributed throughout the construction community. Suppliers wouldn't extend credit, clients wouldn't hire him, and skilled workers avoided association with his projects. The man went from project manager to unemployable in record time, proving that burning bridges with family members who control your career prospects requires more planning than he'd invested. My children's attempts at reconciliation worked about as well as their original deception skills, which is to say they were transparent, poorly planned, and ultimately ineffective. Jake sent letters apologizing for his role in the conspiracy, but his apologies read like homework assignments, where he was trying to say what he thought I wanted to hear rather than expressing genuine understanding of his actions. Emma's attempts were even worse: emotional manipulation mixed with teenage drama that would make soap opera writers cringe. Both kids seemed to think that saying sorry would magically restore trust they'd spent months systematically destroying. My relationship with Lisa, Mike's ex-wife, developed into something surprisingly positive because shared trauma sometimes creates the most honest connections between people. We became genuine friends who could discuss the absurdity of our situation without judgment or pretense. Lisa understood what it felt like to discover that someone you trusted completely had been systematically lying to you for years. Our friendship was built on mutual respect and shared recognition that we'd both survived relationships with people who specialized in deception. My new house represented an upgrade from family dysfunction to actual peace and quiet. The place came with mountain views instead of suburban drama, neighbors who minded their own business instead of relatives who created problems, and silence that wasn't broken by coordinated lying or whispered conspiracies. I could work from home without wondering what deception was being planned in other rooms. I could sleep without concern about what secrets were being kept from me. The house was a sanctuary where every relationship was honest because I controlled who had access to my space and my life. Choosing myself required burning everything else down, but sometimes complete destruction is the only way to clear ground for building something better. The scorched earth approach wasn't vindictive, it was practical. Half measures would have left room for continued manipulation, ongoing drama, and people who thought they could negotiate their way back into positions where they could hurt me again. Total separation created clean boundaries that couldn't be misunderstood or gradually eroded over time. My new life proved that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, while the people who wronged you deal with the natural results of their choices. Mike, Sarah, and my children had spent months planning and coordinating deception that required sustained effort and deliberate dishonesty. Their actions weren't mistakes, they were strategic decisions that demonstrated their character and priorities. Some people make errors in judgment during difficult times and deserve understanding. Others make calculated choices that reveal exactly who they are underneath all the family loyalty rhetoric. The evidence was overwhelming, the betrayal was systematic, and the response had to match the scale of their deception. Some betrayals deserve scorched earth responses rather than second chances, and this was definitely one of them. When people spend months systematically planning your destruction while looking you in the eye every day, forgiveness becomes enabling rather than healing. Family loyalty gets earned through actions, not inherited through DNA. Blood relations don't excuse betrayal or guarantee access to your rebuilt life. The best revenge turned out to be living well while watching the people who wronged me deal with consequences they never saw coming. They thought I was the weak, oblivious provider they could manipulate forever. They were wrong.